The cafe was caught in that quiet in-between hour when the rush had faded but the evening crowd hadn't yet arrived. A few scattered customers sat absorbed in their own worlds, laptops open, headphones in, spoons gently tapping porcelain cups. Soft instrumental music hummed in the background, barely noticeable, like a polite guest that didn't want to intrude. Aisha sat by the window, her posture straight but tense, as if she were holding herself together with invisible threads. Her fingers curled tightly around a ceramic mug, the warmth long gone but still clung to out of habit. Outside, the world moved with a kind of purpose she felt detached from, cars sliding past, people laughing, someone on a hurried phone call. Everything seemed certain. Everything except her. She glanced at her reflection in the glass for a brief second, then looked away. She had dressed carefully for this, nothing too bold, nothing too plain. A soft blue kurta, minimal makeup, hair tied back neatly. She didn't want to look like she was trying too hard. But she also didn't want to look like she had given up. Across from her sat Hamza, relaxed in a way that made her slightly uneasy. Not careless, not uninterested, just steady. His elbows rested lightly on the table, his hands loosely clasped, his attention entirely on her. He wasn't scrolling through his phone. He wasn't looking around. He was just there, present. It had been a long time since she'd experienced that. They had exchanged basic conversation earlier, work, mutual acquaintances, light jokes that skimmed the surface. He worked in finance, she in a small private school. He spoke calmly, without trying to impress. That, more than anything, made her cautious. People who didn't try too hard often had nothing to prove, or everything to hide. She hadn't decided which one he was yet. A silence settled between them again, not entirely uncomfortable, but heavy enough that she knew it needed to be broken. Aisha inhaled slowly, her chest tightening as she made a decision she had made many times before. "You seem like a good man," she said, her voice controlled but carrying a quiet weight. "So I think I should be honest before this goes anywhere." Hamza didn't flinch. He simply nodded once, his gaze steady. "I appreciate honesty." There was no hesitation in his response, no visible curiosity or tension. Just acceptance. It almost threw her off. She pressed her lips together briefly, then continued. "I'm a single mom." The words came out clean, practiced. She had said them enough times to remove the tremor, the vulnerability. Now they landed like a statement of fact, simple, direct, unavoidable. But inside, her heart had already started preparing for the shift. The subtle change in expression. The slight withdrawal. The polite smile that meant this won't work, but I'll be nice about it. She had seen it all before. "My son is 5, she added, filling the silence before it could stretch too long. "His name is Daniel." She wasn't sure why she said his name. Maybe to make it real. Maybe to remind herself that this wasn't something to apologize for. "His father left when he was a baby," she continued, her tone flattening slightly, like she was reciting something from memory. "No contact since. No support. It's just me." She watched Hamza carefully now, her eyes searching his face for any sign, any flicker, that things had changed. But he just listened. No raised eyebrows. No forced sympathy. No awkward shifting in his seat. Just listening. Aisha felt a strange tension build inside her. This wasn't how it usually went. "I've learned to say it early," she said, her voice sharpening slightly as she leaned back. "Saves time." Hamza tilted his head a fraction. Why would it need to save time? The question caught her off guard, not because it was complex, but because it sounded genuine. She let out a small, dry laugh. "Because men don't like single moms." There it was. The line she had built her expectations around. The shield she used before anyone else could reject her. If she said it first, it hurt less when they proved it right. Her fingers tightened slightly around the mug again, though she didn't realize it. "I've been through this enough times," she continued, her words flowing more easily now, fueled by a mix of frustration and quiet resignation. "At first, everything is fine. They're interested, curious, sometimes even impressed that I'm managing everything alone." She paused, her eyes drifting briefly to the window before returning to him. "But the moment they find out about my son, something changes. It's subtle sometimes, but it's always there. They start thinking ahead, about responsibility, about complications, about things they didn't sign up for." Her voice softened, losing its edge. "Some of them try to be polite. They say things like, 'You deserve someone good,' or, 'You're very strong.' But what they really mean is, 'Not me.'" The words lingered, heavy with memory. "And the others?" Hamza asked quietly. She gave a faint, humorless smile. "The others don't bother hiding it. They ask questions like it's a job interview. Does the father come around? How much time do you have? Would you expect me to take responsibility? She shook her head slightly. It stops feeling like getting to know someone. It starts feeling like I'm explaining why I'm a risk. Hamza's expression didn't change, but his eyes sharpened with focus. Aisha looked down again, her voice dropping to almost a whisper. And honestly, I get it. That part always surprised people. The fact that she didn't sound angry. Just tired. It's not easy, she continued. It's not simple. There's a child involved. A life that already exists. It's not a blank page anymore. She traced the rim of her mug slowly. So yeah, men don't like single moms. Silence followed. This was usually the moment. The turning point. The beginning of the end. She waited. 1 second. 2, 3. But instead of the expected shift, Hamza leaned back slightly, his gaze thoughtful rather than distant. Who told you that? He asked. Aisha blinked, her brows knitting together. No one had to tell me. I've experienced it. Experienced rejection, he said calmly. Not truth. She stared at him, a flicker of irritation rising. Isn't that the same thing? No, he replied, his tone steady. It just means you met the wrong men. The simplicity of his answer unsettled her more than any rejection ever had. For a moment, she didn't know how to respond. You don't understand, she said finally, her voice tightening slightly. It's different when you have a child. People don't just see you, they see your situation. And what's wrong with your situation? He asked. The question landed like a stone dropped into still water. Aisha opened her mouth to answer, but nothing came out. What was wrong with her situation? She had spent years accepting the idea that something was, without ever clearly defining it. She started, then stopped, frustration creeping into her expression. It's complicated. Hamza leaned forward slightly, his voice calm but firm. Raising a child alone is not something to hide. It's something most people don't have the strength to do. She looked at him, confusion replacing her frustration. This wasn't the script. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. But that's not how people see it, she said, almost defensively. Then maybe you've been listening to the wrong people for too long, he replied. The words hit deeper than she expected. Aisha leaned back slowly, her grip on the mug loosening for the first time. Her heart was beating faster now, but not with anxiety. With uncertainty. For the first time in a long while, she wasn't bracing herself for rejection. She was facing something far more unfamiliar. A perspective that didn't match the story she had been telling herself. And she didn't know whether to trust it, or fear it. The air outside the cafe was cooler than it had been earlier, carrying that soft evening breeze that makes everything feel slower, quieter. Streetlights had just begun to flicker on, casting pale halos across the pavement. A few cars passed by, headlights sweeping over the sidewalk before disappearing into the distance. Somewhere nearby, someone laughed loudly, the sound echoing faintly before fading. Aisha and Hamza stepped out together, the faint bell above the cafe door jingling behind them. The world felt oddly still compared to the storm of thoughts swirling inside her. She wrapped her shawl around her shoulders a little tighter, not because she was cold, but because she suddenly felt exposed in a way she hadn't expected. They walked side by side, neither rushing nor slowing. Their footsteps echoed softly on the pavement, falling into an unspoken rhythm. For a while, neither of them spoke. Aisha could feel Hamza beside her, steady, unhurried, not pushing for conversation. That quiet presence made her strangely uneasy. She was used to people either talking too much to fill the silence or withdrawing into awkward distance. This was different. Finally, she stopped. Hamza took another step before realizing she had halted. He turned back, his expression questioning but patient. You didn't react the way I expected, she said, her voice low but steady. Hamza tilted his head slightly. What did you expect? She let out a breath she didn't realize she was holding. Distance. Awkwardness. Some polite way to step back without making it obvious. He watched her for a moment before replying. And if I had done that, it would have confirmed what you believe. Aisha hesitated, then nodded slowly. Yes. He didn't look offended. If anything, he seemed thoughtful. And that would have made it true. That men don't like single moms. She frowned slightly, her brow creasing. Not all men. But enough. Hamza's gaze didn't waver. You're still trying to protect the belief. A flicker of irritation crossed her face. I'm trying to be realistic. He shook his head once, gently. No, you're trying to protect yourself. That made her go quiet. The words weren't accusing, but they landed with weight. She looked away, her fingers tightening slightly around the edge of her shawl. Is that wrong? she asked after a moment, her voice softer. No, Hamza replied calmly. It's human, but it also builds walls where there don't always need to be walls. She let out a quiet breath. Easy to say when you're not the one who gets turned away. I didn't say it was easy, he answered. I said it's worth questioning. She looked back at him, searching his face. There was no pity in his expression, no forced optimism. Just sincerity. Hamza took a step closer, not invading her space, just close enough that his voice didn't have to rise. Tell me something. If a man had a child and was raising them alone, would you see him as less? Aisha didn't hesitate. No, why not? Because he didn't run, she said. Because he stayed. Because he took responsibility when it mattered. He held her gaze. Then why is it different for you? The question hit her harder than she expected. She blinked, her lips parting slightly, but no answer came. She searched her own thoughts, realizing with a sudden uncomfortable clarity that she had never actually challenged that belief. She had simply accepted it, like a rule that came with her circumstances. She started, then stopped. She looked away, her chest tightening. I don't know, she admitted quietly. Hamza let the silence sit for a moment before speaking again. Sometimes the harshest judgments aren't the ones we get from others. They're the ones we accept without questioning. She exhaled slowly, feeling something shift inside her, something uncomfortable but not painful. More like a long-held tension beginning to loosen. After a pause, she spoke again, her voice cautious. And what about you? Hamza raised an eyebrow slightly. What about me? Do you see it as a complication? She asked, forcing herself to meet his eyes. A woman with a child. A ready-made family. Responsibility you didn't ask for. Hamza studied her for a few seconds, not rushing to answer. When he did, his tone was steady. I see it as part of your life, he said. And if I'm interested in you, that means understanding your life. Not just the convenient parts. Her breath hitched slightly. That doesn't scare you, she asked quietly. What exactly should scare me? He replied. The responsibility. The judgment from others. The fact that things won't be simple. Hamza gave a small, almost amused smile. When has anything meaningful ever been simple? The answer was so straightforward, so grounded, that it caught her off guard. She stared at him, searching for doubt, hesitation, anything that would signal he was just saying what sounded good. But there was none. And your son, he continued, he's not a problem. He's a person. Someone important to you. That matters. Aisha felt something tighten in her chest, something sharp and warm at the same time. For years, she had grown used to conversations circling around inconvenience. Men calculating time, commitment, complication. No one had ever simply said what Hamza just did. No one had ever referred to Daniel as someone who mattered without hesitation. Her voice was quieter when she spoke again. You're not worried about what people will say. Hamza shrugged lightly. People will always say something. If you let that decide your life, you'll never live it. She swallowed, feeling a lump form in her throat that she didn't fully understand. I've spent years telling myself that men don't want this, she said softly. It became easier to accept it than to hope for something different. Hamza's gaze softened, but his voice remained firm. Then maybe it's time to stop telling yourself that. The words didn't feel like comfort. They felt like a challenge. A gentle one. A necessary one. Aisha stood there, feeling the cool air brush against her face, her thoughts entangling slowly. The weight she had been carrying, this constant readiness for rejection, suddenly felt heavier than she realized. Maybe because, for the first time, she wasn't carrying it alone. You know, she said after a long moment, a faint smile touching her lips, your reaction really did shock me. Hamza let out a soft chuckle. Good shock or bad shock? She met his gaze, and this time, there was no guardedness in her eyes. Good, she said quietly. Definitely good. The night seemed quieter now, calmer. For the first time in years, Aisha wasn't preparing herself for rejection or explaining her life as if it needed justification. She was simply standing there, talking to someone who wasn't afraid of her reality. And for the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to think, not assume, not brace, not defend, but simply think. Maybe not all stories have to end the same way.